This is okay with me. Thank you for.
Okay, so ready to go. All right, today we have Raphael Schranz with us today. I hope I didn't butcher your last name there. Thanks for being on this recording, Raphael.
Thank you very much for having me.
Can you give me an introduction about yourself and what you do?
Yes, sure. So I'm Raphael Schrantz, and I'm a certified circular economy specialist. I have years of practical experience in the sustainability sector. Um, Started out in waste management, then basically built my own company, and now I'm working as a self-employed circular economy consultant. What I'm doing, I'm helping companies in the transition to circular economy and to regenerative business operations. I'm specialized in training on general education, analytics, and strategy planning for companies, organizations, and institutions. So what I'm basically doing is a threefold service. So I'm providing trainings about the circular economy. These are high-level educational programs designed to raise awareness and understanding of the principles, strategies, and benefits of the circular economy, but also associated technologies such as blockchain, IoT, and AI-based systems, and how they can be used in circular industrial economy. Um, these trainings basically aim to equip individuals, businesses, organizations with the knowledge and tools to transform or to transition from this linear take, make, waste approach to more sustainable and regenerative systems. Um, Key concepts are included, for example, waste prevention, resource optimization, product design for longevity, importance of closing and narrowing and slowing material and resource loops, and also including case studies, best practice example to inspire participants to implement circular economy practices in their respective fields and to overall contribute to a more resource efficient and environmentally friendly future. The second thing I'm providing is a circular mapping processes. So this identifies or involves identifying and analyzing linear flow of materials and resources in a specific region or company, and basically to transform these into circular value loops. The goal of this mapping process is actually to have a comprehensive understanding of how these resources are used, reused, wasted throughout the life cycle, um, and to basically enable them to visualize these resource flows so they can actually pinpoint where materials, energy, but also water leak from the system, which is also then leading to environmental impacts and adverse effects on the environment. Um, and the second thing is strategy planning. So I'm helping people in their emission and cost reduction strategies to really bring the circular economy down to a business level, to combine sustainability aspects in terms of environmental protection, but also economic benefits and also social matters. So that's a little bit of an overview of the topics that I'm providing with my company. And yeah, happy to go into that interview today.
Awesome. So I'd like to back up a little bit. And for those who aren't completely clear, what is a brief description of the distinction between a linear business model and a circular one?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are multiple definitions, right? There are a lot of different terms and a lot of different definitions that try to want to say the same thing. But linear business models are have an underlying logic structure of take, make, waste logic. So the production system or the business model is inherently linear, whereas a circular business model wants to eliminate waste, it wants to circulate resources, and it wants to regenerate the environment. Um, we can look at circular business models through different lenses. So it has to be regenerative, but there are other things that we can include. But in general, I always look at these business models in terms of resource flows, right? So circular business models, they slow, they narrow, and they close resource loops. And what I mean by that is they slow, which means they enable companies to use stuff longer. They narrow resource flows, which means it enables companies to use less and also achieve the same exact outcome. and they also close resource loops. So they cycle back materials and also resources like water and energy systems. The There's another key differentiation for linear business models, but also for circular business models. So that the key difference is also the transfer of liability, right? Because in a linear business model, the liability of a product at the point of sale basically gets transferred to other stakeholders in the value chain, for example, wholesalers or to customers. Whereas in a circular business model, the product that provides performance is basically circulated between user and company. This basically creates a liability loop where the liability comes back to the producer of the product when it's no longer needed by the user. And these, of course, these leads to drastic environmental benefits such as waste elimination through circular design choices, economic benefits through predictable and stable revenue streams, and social benefits through job creation in various fields.
Okay, great. A big part of our audience are SME owners. And so, as you know, based in the European Union, there's a lot of new regulations coming out that are pretty strict about implementing ESG in their companies. What is your advice for SMEs who are looking to implement circular business models in their company for the first time?
So the starting point would be look at your waste streams, right? Because that tells a story, right? Because waste in the circular economy is seen as a design failure, right? So make sure you identify the products and materials that are becoming waste in your company or in your organizations and find alternatives for that. So that's one thing that you can actually implement, because that also leads to reduced disposal costs for these companies, and replace these things with products and materials that have circular design characteristics. These are fundamental to circular business models, right? Because you need to apply characteristics, for example, high durability, to create these value loops, right? Um, and also, what's a good advice is we need a little bit of a mindset shift. So you're not selling a product in the future; you're basically providing performance, and that's a key differentiation, right? So we're going into performance based economy, where people are going to rent out their products, then the people are going to use it, the performance is provided, and if the people don't use it anymore, the companies actually take these products back. Then they make sure that they are uh, clean, that they are repaired, and then basically rent them out again, right? So we're going into a sharing economy, performance-based economy. So we also need that mindset shift on going away from volume-based production and selling units very, very cheaply as much as possible, or as many units as possible. So a little bit of a holistic approach, but I would say this is a very good advice and a very good start.
Okay. And I know that one of the biggest pain points or let's say the number one stress of an SME owner to implement a circular business model or to implement ESG is regarding the budget, right? So everyone's stressed out about how much more they have to spend on their budget in order to implement these new practices. Do you have any specific advice for that, or do you have any recommendations regarding being as efficient as possible on the finance side?
Well, with everything, it takes investment, right? So it takes an investment of labor, it takes an investment of a little bit of money to basically shift these operations. But of course, there are funding opportunities available, and there are also investors that maybe can provide some funding on that. But of course, if you want to transform your operations, actually, if you want to go circular, then basically you need to invest in things that can be circular, right? So invest in things that are, again, have circular design characteristics. But also what you can do if you're doing that, you're also reducing your costs, right? So for example, reduce disposal costs, reduce costs for primary resource use because you're always getting these products back, right? So the amount of investment that you actually can do also has on the other side a lot of cost reductions, reduce costs for resource use, for example. So yeah, of course, everything that you want to do, everything that you want to change in your company requires investments. Um, the liquidity markets are currently a little bit dry, so there's not a lot of very high investments that are easily applied to the different companies. The investors are also a little bit more hesitant. Um, but yeah, there are certain things that you can easily implement that are not requiring you to really have high amounts of money to actually invest in these things.
Okay. Um, what are some practical steps that SMEs can take based on what you offer with your help to quickly and efficiently start the journey to a circular business model?
Yeah, so it's important to look at the industry and the economic sector that they're in, right? There are universally applicable strategies, for example, slowing, narrowing, and closing of these resource loops. But of course, there is no one size fits all model, right? Because the circular economy actually touches every single industrial sector. But in general, these measures for waste prevention are crucial, right? That's really the start. Um, Identify which resources are used in your company, what products you can rent out in the future rather than sell, and what design choices that you actually need in your product, such as, for example, high durability. Right? Because if you're having a product that easily breaks after the second use cycle, for example, then that's a problem, right? Because you cannot keep up these circular loops and these um circular value loops in general, right? Because you actually have to repair them and make a lot of other things. So high durability would be a very practical step to look at, to really kickstart your circular business model. And of
Great.
course, other practical implementations, for example, circular energy systems or maybe storage system, maybe power your company with renewables, for example. Yeah, so that would also be a very interesting thing. Biogas production is also another thing that it requires, of course, a little bit more investment, but that also would help you to not only reduce waste, but also to use that waste as electricity production means. Um, yeah, so in general, I would say the waste that is produced and the systemic leakage, look at this, assess that, and find alternatives in terms of circularity for high durability and these design choices.
Awesome. So my last question is, so if you look at the news now, it looks like the world's on fire. Yeah, this week, right? I don't know if you saw the disaster in Hawaii. A whole city was
Yes,
burnt,
yes.
90 people died. Of all the businesses in the world, according to my research, currently less than 10% are circular, which is pretty
Hmm.
concerning. Based on your
Yes, it's a
professional
seven.
experience, what's
Yes.
that?
Hmm.
7%.
It's 7.2%. Yes. Hmm.
Okay. So that's pretty concerning, right? So based
Hmm.
on your professional experience, and what you've seen, when do you envision this to where it's realistically at least 50%? And what will it take from the public or the private sector to get to that point?
Yes, I mean, the thing is, as you have mentioned, this is a horrible statistic because it on the flip side means that we're basically wasting 92% of our materials globally, right? So they are not reintegrated into the system, not reintegrated into the production and the landing, um, in landfills, water bodies. They get incinerated, so it's really much inefficient would be an understatement. It's actually, if I want to be very clear here, it's actually pretty much a disgrace to our intelligence as human beings that we're actually having that system. But um, what I would say to transform all of these industrial sectors, so energy production, food production, and consumption systems, manufacturing, textiles, plastics, electronics, to really transform these sectors and to have at least 50% circularity rate, that of course takes time. So I'm hoping that we can actually manage to pull that off in the next 7 to 10 years. So my time horizon will be 2030 to 2032. so that our systems are 50% circular. And up until 2050, I have the hope and I still believe that this is really possible, that our global economic system can be circular, maybe not to 100%. So there will always be systemic leakage due to entropic circumstances and due to circumstances and principles of thermodynamics, but um, we can achieve a very high circularity rate up until 2050. So I would hope that we can actually have a circularity rate of up to 85 to 90% up until 2050. There are a lot of regulations that are going to kick in, mindset shifts that take place from a consumer level, but also from a very high level from institutions. So they are seeing the writing on the wall. And also there need to be drastic changes in the financial system and in general, the overall business operations and how people think about doing business.
Awesome.
The role of the private sector and the role of the public sector is a very, very good question, and thank you for that. So of course, private sector, we maybe start with the private sector, right? So the private sector is really much equipped to do innovation and research, right? Because there's a lot of money sitting in private companies and a lot of global companies. So private companies, they're actually at the forefront of developing innovative products, services, technologies that facilitate these circular practices. This includes like designing products for durability, repairability, recyclability in these design choices. In general, going into that circular design a little bit more, businesses are responsible for integrating circular principles into their product and service design process, considering entire life cycles of products, sourcing raw materials, into life management. Supply chain management would be a very interesting one. So they are equipped to collaborate with suppliers across the supply chain with all stakeholders to ensure the use of sustainable materials, also ethical sourcing, reduced environmental impacts throughout the supply chain. What we also want to see is extended producer responsibility. So businesses are expected to take responsibility for the entire life cycle of their product. So that includes collection, that includes recycling, that includes proper disposal, and the end of life of that useful life. But in general, as the circular economy also says, that's actually the last part, right? Because the circular economy says, well, we want you, the private sector, to build products that are not becoming waste, right? So we want businesses to eliminate waste by design. Currently, we see a lot of responsibility that is shifted from these private sector entities to a lot of other stakeholders, which is, in my opinion, very, very concerning. Then we also need to focus on that they are actually implementing circular business models, so that, for example, business models such as leasing, sharing models, subscription services, can actually be implemented because they are actually promoting longer product lifetimes, right? This reduces also the need for constant new production. And if also that constant need for new production is decreased, that also decreases the amount of extraction that we have to do and the extraction of raw materials that we actually need to extract. And if we can manage to reduce this extraction, then we can actually kickstart regeneration practices and regeneration in the biosphere, because we know, for example, that 90% of biodiversity loss is actually directly linked to the extraction of resources, right? So a lot of global emissions, half of water stress globally is actually linked to extraction. So because we're using these products longer and slow these resource flows down, or if we narrow them, this goes way back to the extraction process to the beginning as well. Also, investment and financing. So private investors also have a responsibility and also a role to play, of course. They can support the circular economy transition by investing into innovative startups, and projects that focus on circular solution and other sustainable technologies. So that would be a very important thing. And when we shift into the public sector, what the public sector can do, Policy and regulations. I think that's where their field lies. So governments are pretty much instrumental in creating policies, regulations that incentivize circular practices. Include setting standards for waste management, implementing global reverse logistics systems, promoting eco-design, producing or implementing extended producer responsibility programs or EPR programs. Infrastructural development, they are responsible for developing necessary infrastructure to support these circular systems, including recycling facilities, including waste collection systems, reprocessing facilities, so we can actually cycle these materials back into production. Also, awareness and education. They really play a crucial role in raising public awareness about the importance of the circular economy, promoting sustainable and responsible consumption, providing information about proper waste management. Collaboration and stakeholder engagement would be another one. So collaboration and partnerships and stakeholder engagement across the entire industrial system and ecosystem is crucial. So that's a very fundamental part of the circular economy. We simply cannot do that in silos. Governments can facilitate collaboration between these various stakeholders, which are businesses, which are NGOs, community on a regional level, and to really work collectively towards these circular economy goals. I think that's it cannot be overstated how important this is. And of course, procurement practices, right? Because the public sector actually has a lot of buying and purchasing power. So green procurement will be a very important thing. What are the things that are actually procured, right? Grants and tenders. What are the requirements? What are the requirements that the companies need to fulfill for the future to basically supply, for example, nations with different materials, with different resources. So public sector, those agencies can lead by example by adopting circular procurement practices, purchasing products and services that align with circular principles. This is really important, and also what we have touched upon earlier, which I think is also very critical, is incentives and funding. Right, so governments can provide financial incentives, but also they can also provide grants. They can provide subsidies to businesses that are actually adopting these circular practices, right? Because if businesses are adopting these circular practices, why shouldn't they get, for example, tax deductions or other financial incentives, right? Because that's what we want, right? And if we want something from people, then we actually have to say, well, if you're doing that, we're appreciative of that, and you're going to get something out of that. If people are punished for that, if they're doing that, then it's not going to fly. And of course, a very important part, but that goes a little bit into an analytical and compliance field, so reporting and monitoring, establishing frameworks, monitoring and reporting on circular economy progress, but also on accountability and transparency in this transition, so that people and companies are held accountable for what they're doing, for what they're putting on the market. So in general, this is also where the public sector can come in. There were some things that the public sector and also the private sector can do. There are more, but I tried to bring
No,
it
I think
down
you're
to
good.
the most important ones.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary for our audience. All right, Raphael. I appreciate it. I think that's it from my side. Thanks for being on.
Thank you also very much, and thank you for the interview.
Of
And
course.
looking forward to meeting you again.
And just one more favor, please. I try to, when we publish the blog, we try to put like engaging graphics. Does your company have any graphics that we could use in the blog, and it can include your logo? For example, a differentiation of the linear and the circular business model, anything like that. I don't know if you have like a bank of resources that I could use.
Sure. I have a lot of material on visuals. Yes, no problem.
Amazing. That would be amazing if you
We're
could
go
send that to me.
we're gonna come back to you with that. Yes, of course.
Awesome. Thanks, Rafael.
Thank you very much. Have a
All
great
right.
day.
Have a good day.
Bye bye.
Bye.